a great turnout. Welcome, everybody. My name is Peter Van Praagh. I'm the president of Halifax International Security Forum. It's our 15th year. I'm delighted to see everybody. I want to give a special welcome to the winners of our 15 at 15 Building Democracy program, Youth Building Democracy program that we created to mark our 15th year. These are teenagers from various countries around the world who are here in Halifax to participate in our conversations from the perspective of future leaders. I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon with Minister Bill Blair. It's really a pleasure to work with you, and I'm delighted to share the stage with you today. Thank you. Thank you to the Government of Canada for your continued support of the annual Halifax International Security Forum. Canada recognized from the very beginning the value of bringing the democratic world together to have frank and open conversations about our shared defense and security. Your government's commitment to this event and your personal enthusiasm for it are some of the reasons for our continued success. 2023 marks the 15th time we have brought over 300 leaders from more than 75 of the world's democracies to Halifax for what I like to call their annual dose of moral clarity. This year, that moral clarity feels more important than ever before. In this violent new era of global conflict that we are experiencing can be directly linked to Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Putin's aggression gave bad actors and rogue regimes permission to challenge the rules-based international order and our democratic values. The simple truth is that when Putin fails in Ukraine, solving all global issues will become easier. Our goal this weekend is to show that China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, who we're calling the crinks, showing them that our resolve cannot be shaken. When democracies work together, there's no challenge that cannot be met. With strong voices like Minister Blair's, I'm confident that the Halifax International Security Forum will achieve that goal. Minister Blair, thank you again.
Well, Peter, let me, if I may, begin by thanking you for your kind introduction, but also thank you for the extraordinary work of you and your team. This is an incredibly important forum, and people are traveling from all over the free world, the democracies of the world, and it's an extraordinary gathering. And this is, of course, the 15th annual International Security Forum, and so congratulations on your anniversary as well. Bon après-midi tout le monde. It is, as I said, a great honor to have the opportunity to be here. This is my first attendance at the Halifax Security Forum, but its reputation well precedes it, and this is a forum that is always highly valued by our allies and by members of our government, and when I say that, all members of the Canadian government. The situation in Gaza is dire, and we are making investments to ensure that the Palestinians in Gaza have the life-saving humanitarian aid that they need. And meanwhile, in other parts of the world, such as the Indo-Pacific, countries like China are openly challenging the rules-based international order. As a Pacific country it's ourselves, Canada is increasing our military presence in the region. We need to be there, and we will be there. And around the world, state and non-state actors are spreading disinformation meant to divide and cause chaos. There have been advances in technology like artificial intelligence, which creates, in some circumstances, new opportunities, but also new threats and new battlefields. Climate change continues to wreak havoc at home and abroad, and it has been particularly challenging for the Canadian Armed Forces, being there for Canadians and supporting them in times of emergency. These challenges may seem at times to be insurmountable, but we owe it to future generations to take on these challenges and to come up together with meaningful solutions. And at this pivotal moment, it's also crucial that nations like ours remain united. And that's one of the importance of the Halifax International Security Forum, that we all continue to value peace, order, and good government, and that we work together to find common ground and preserve the cooperation and multilateralism that has underpinned global security for nearly 80 years. And when everything we stand for is challenged, as it has been by Vladimir Putin, we must stand with the Ukrainian people. We have made significant investment in military aid and military training through Operation Unifier. We have tried to be a strong, reliable partner to Ukraine, because their fight for freedom is the fight for all free democratic nations. The values shared by Canada and Ukraine are also shared by billions of people around the world. And when these values come under attack, it's important that we learn to stand together. And again, that's why the Halifax International Forum is so important. Over the next 3 days, political, military, and industrial leaders from around the world will explore how we can meet the challenges of this increasingly dangerous world. Our conversations must be frank, they must be timely, and they must be comprehensive, because the complex nature of these challenges means that they will not be solved just over the next 72 hours. But the act of sitting together, of discussing them, sends a clear message that in a world full of disruption, we are prepared to stand together and to work together. Again, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the HISF President, Peter Van Praagh, and everyone involved in organizing this event, including those at HFX and Canada's Department of National Defence. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank and welcome our allies, partners, and friends who have traveled from across the free world to join us here. Peter, we look forward to the next few days. Thanks to your team for their incredible work when putting on this remarkable conference. And now we're happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Minister.
We'll now take questions from media. Please use the 2 microphones that you see behind you. We'll take 1 question and 1 follow-up per outlet. Please state your name and your outlet. We'll go to the first one.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Massa Mortazavi. I am from Iran International TV. Thank you for this opportunity. We have repeatedly heard that Iran is contributing to proxy wars, both in Russia against Ukraine and now Hamas invading Israel, which was tragic. And we have heard many of the members of the parliament mentioning that IRGC, the arm of the Islamic Republic, having arms in Canada, threatening Canadians, both Iranian citizens here in this country. Do you think that the government of Canada ever is going to list the IRGC as a terrorist entity? You mentioned that we have to be frank today.
Yes, ma'am, and I appreciate the question. I think it's an important question. I have also had many conversations with the Iranian-Canadian community, and Canada has already listed Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism, which on a level of international law is a very significant and serious determination with respect to Iran. We've also imposed significant sanctions and restrictions on Iran that are both necessary. Part of Iran's response and their export of terrorism is through the Al-Quds Force. We've also already listed those as a terrorist entity. But you ask a very important question about the IRGC. The listing of terrorist entities is based on the advice we receive from the RCMP and from our National Security and Intelligence establishment. But I also want to assure you, and particularly I want to assure Iranian Canadians, we understand how concerning the activities of the IRGC is. We believe that it is necessary to do more, and that work is ongoing.
Okay, thank you. And as a follow-up question, may I ask that the sanctions that you mentioned don't seem to be completely effective effective towards the individuals who were sanctioned. We have sample of people who are now in Canada who might have been affected by the sanctions. Do we also have the law? I understand that we have the law, but do we have the resource to enforce the law?
Yes, ma'am. That is the responsibility of both the RCMP and then our national security intelligence agencies. They are very much seized with that responsibility, and there are investigations ongoing. I'm not at liberty to discuss those investigations, but I want to assure you that it is a matter that we take with great seriousness. And when we imposed those sanctions, our intention was to place very real and significant limits on the ability to Iran to export terrorism and to support that type of activity around the world. And we will do everything that is our responsibility to do to make sure that we uphold those sanctions and the rule of law.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question.
Sir.
Hi, Mike McDonald from the Canadian Press in Halifax. I wanted to ask you about the defense policy update, Minister Blair. You've been quoted as saying that you've described this policy as a national industrial policy. What did you mean by that?
Well, frankly, it's what I was trying to be clear in is it's more than just a defense policy update. It's an important update for our military defense industry in this country. It's also an important update on our policy with respect to foreign policy, because I believe absolutely defense policy and foreign policy are intertwined, and both considerations are important. It's also a policy about innovation, and it's a policy about And so we have been working very hard in the development of that policy, and quite frankly, we said in Budget 22 that we would be bringing it forward. It is going to require, the defense policy update is updating our strong, secure, and engaged policy from 2017. There are many very important, significant investments being made under the SSE policy of 2017, but the world is changing. And what we are seeing and what our allies are making very clear to us is we have to make additional investments. And so that work is ongoing. It'll be part of a very important part of our future budget discussions, because there are investments that need to be made. But we also, I believe, have to make sure that we are clear, we provide clarity and certainty to Canadian industry, because they're going to be an important partner. And I would quote the Secretary, the NATO Secretary, Jens Stoltenberg. He said, "Without industry, there is no defense." I agree with that sentiment, and that's one of the reasons I made that reference.
And just as a follow-up on the update to the defense policy, I've heard speculation that this policy is just too expensive, that you can't get it paid for, and that's why it's going on a year overdue. How do you comment?
Well, I would comment by saying, first of all, I think we have a responsibility, all governments do, to make sure that we spend the public's money carefully, that we produce real value, and that the money we invest is an investment in creating public value. But I also want to be very clear. The defense of Canada is our government's highest priority, and making sure that we also recognize the importance of working closely and collaboratively with our allies in NATO, in NORAD, in the Indo-Pacific, in the Arctic, and here at home. And so these are important investments, but it's important that we do it right.
Next question.
Hi, Robbie Grammer, diplomatic correspondent with Foreign Policy Magazine. Thanks so much, Mr. Minister.
Sure.
There have been elections in some, but not all, Central European countries where candidates seen as more pro-Kremlin won. U.S. aid to Ukraine, which is seen as critical, is currently stuck in Congress. The flow of aid is uncertain. I'm just wondering, with these headwinds, do you feel that Western support for Ukraine as a whole is slipping, and how do you plan to fight back against that?
Well, I can tell you, I have the privilege of sitting at the table with our NATO allies, but also part of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, and it's a multilateral table that is headed up by Secretary of State Austin from the United States, in which all countries contribute to the overall effort of supporting Ukraine. I can simply tell you, and I do appreciate that there are various political discussions taking place in a number of our allied countries, but I have seen absolutely unwavering and unequivocal support for the support of Ukraine among those allies, and I believe that remains strong. I think there is a very strong recognition among all of our partners in that room at the Ukraine Defense Contact Group that Ukraine, we are supporting Ukraine with munitions and with money. but they are fighting this battle with their blood. And in many respects, they are fighting on all of our behalf against that very terrible challenge to the international rules-based order, to the sovereignty of nations, and they're on the front line, and we believe absolutely unequivocally, and I think our allies do as well, that support is essential, and we have to continue to support them for as long as it takes with whatever is required.
And you spoke about the importance of being frank at this conference. Do you see a path for Ukraine to achieve full military victory and take back all of its territory, particularly after the failed counteroffensive that we saw this spring?
Well again, I think we're watching very carefully with the progress of that battle, and it keeps on taking interesting and sometimes challenging turns. But again, the Ukraine people, I've had the opportunity to meet with President Zelensky. I've met with his defense minister, Rustem Umerov. They remain absolutely committed to victory over the Russian aggression, and we remain committed to being there to support them as they work to achieve that victory.
Next question.
Justin Lang, freelance. Minister Blair, I'm not sure if you read it, but a couple weeks ago in The Economist, General Zaluzhny, the head of the Chief of Defense Staff for Ukraine, basically suggested that the conflict with Russia was at he didn't use the word stalemate, but many others did. He suggested that there would need to be some sort of technological advancement to unfreeze that conflict, likening it to Chinese gunpowder, the invention of Chinese gunpowder. Does Canada, does NATO more broadly have an idea of what sort of technological advancements it can provide to Ukraine that might unlock that conflict?
Part of our discussion among our allies, forgive me, Justin, I don't get into too many of the details of what we're discussing, but among the coalition of nations who are standing together in support, united in their support of Ukraine, we are looking at a number of different coalitions that can be formed with respect to things like air defense, cyber and information technology, armor and aircraft and munitions. And there are a number of these coalitions that we're putting forward. There are, I think, we saw, an extraordinary effort by the Ukraine in the summer offensive, and unfortunately right now it seems to be moving into, I'm not going to use the word stalemate either, but a more static battle environment right now. It remains to be seen what can unlock that, but we're also seeing the nature of warfare is evolving in a fairly significant way, and even right now in the Ukraine, we've gone back even to trench warfare in many locations, and Canadian Armed Forces have been training Ukrainian soldiers in order to have the skills necessary to do that work. But we're also seeing the impact of drones. We're seeing the impact of air defense systems and how important they can be. Long-range munitions are also a significant factor in that particular struggle right now, and there are also, I think, opportunities in AI and quantum and in cyber that could be eventually a significant impact on the outcome of this battle. But right now, the Ukrainians are fighting a life and death struggle for their nation, and we're doing everything we can to help them and support them.
I think the General's point very much was that it's not an eventually question, it has to happen in the short term. Given that, do you envision any changes in either Canada or NATO's contribution to Ukraine in the short term that might move away maybe from traditional munitions and armor towards AI, quantum, drones?
I think that it's a battle being fought on every front, and we are in our discussions at the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. It's a very robust and somewhat confidential discussion, so I can't get into the details of it. But it's a very robust discussion about what will be required for Ukraine to prevail in their struggle against Russia, and we're going to continue to find every way possible to support them. Thanks, Justin.
Next question.
Hello, Premier Channel, Ukraine, Kiev.
Hello.
Yesterday, first of all, thank you very much for support to Ukraine. We work closely with the warriors on the front line, and from them and from us, big thank you, Canada. Yesterday, the breaking headline news in Ukraine was that a Canadian company based in Burnaby, BC, has sold an anti-drone defense complex to Russian Federation in July 2023. We are conducting an investigation, and so far from our part, it seems to be legit because we have found the official documents on the Russian side that it happened. And so this would mean that the Canadian company that is registered as a Defense Ministry Sandbox 2022, has somehow found a loop to do that. So what do you guys do in these situations, and what would be, how is it even possible that something like this could happen?
Well, thank you for the question, ma'am. And quite frankly, I have seen conflicting reports suggesting that as reported in social media may not have been entirely accurate, but at the same time, it is deeply concerning that technologies which are sanctioned and embargoed against a sale to Russia, if it's possible, and I can't confirm that because I don't have that information, but it's a matter, that will be something that will be investigated by our law enforcement and national security intelligence agencies, and if there has been a violation of the sanctions that we put in place, there are legal processes that can then be followed. I can't comment on that. I'm a Minister of the Crown, and I don't want to get ahead of either of those investigations or any subsequent legal action that may take place, but I want to assure you it's a matter that we take very seriously. When we put those sanctions in place, we did it for a reason, and making sure that those important and essential technologies don't get in the hands of our enemies. To see the same type of investment and progress in increasing production here in North America and in Europe. We just recently heard, by the way, from the Minister of Defense in Germany expressing concern about their ability to meet those commitments, and so we're all digging in together to see how that we can address those shortfalls. And I think for our own security going forward, we are learning lessons from the challenges that Ukraine has faced, and I'm hopeful that the lessons we learn from their experience can be applied to our situation to improve our own readiness and preparation.
And if U.S. support for Ukraine starts to wane, will that lead to other Western nations starting to draw down their support as well?
And I would suggest in my conversations with Secretary Austin, I know the Prime Minister's conversations with President Biden, we haven't seen a waning of that interest or that support. The United States has been an incredibly important partner to Ukraine. They have demonstrated, I think, remarkable leadership. As I mentioned, the Ukraine Defense Contact Group is led by Secretary Austin. His support has been unwavering, and he challenges all of us to live up to America's commitment and make it our own commitment as well. And I agree with that. We read the press, and there is always political discussion here in the United States, in Europe, among all our allies. That's I think the great strength of democracies. We are all democracies here, and that are engaged in this, and we're fighting for democracy. And so that debate and that discussion is perfectly healthy and fine, but I've seen no abatement of the United States' commitment, nor Canada's commitment, or among our allies to continuing to support Ukraine for as long as it takes with whatever is required.
Thank you.
Thanks. We'll take this next question and then a final question.
Heidi Petracek with Global National. Minister, thank you very much for being here. In the opening comments, you seem to draw a connection between Russia and Ukraine and what's happening there and what's happening in Israel and Gaza and Hamas. I'm wondering how you can make that connection, what specifically you mean if you can draw that roadmap. I mean, would one be happening without the other? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think my point is that one of the things that we are defending at this forum among our allies, among all democracies around the world, is that international rules-based order, the way in which countries have agreed under law to treat each other, to respect each other's sovereignty and their borders. And we believe that the investments that we make, the conversations we're having, are an investment in defense of that rules-based order. What we saw when Putin invaded Ukraine was a violation of that order, a violation of a nation's sovereignty. And that's why we are supporting Ukraine in their fight. When we saw, frankly, a terrorist organization, Hamas, invade and commit terrible atrocities in Israel, it's a challenge to that international rules-based order. And even when we're in the Indo-Pacific, and we are working hard to maintain international free navigation in international waters, and we are challenged by non-democratic countries who can be quite aggressive in that challenge. But when that happens, it's important that we unite together, stand together, and together defend that order, because if we don't do it, then we'll lose the benefit of those laws. And so that's the challenge for us, I believe. And that's why I make the connection between those events. I hope that's out.
Yep, that does answer. Do I get a follow-up? Yes, I'll take it. There have been protesters throughout Canada, around the world, calling for ceasefire. You know, what is Canada doing when it comes to Israel, Hamas, to address that? We know what Canada is saying, but what's being done? Well,
first of all, can I say I'm glad to live in a free and democratic country where people can have the right, under our charter and our constitution, have the right to protest, have a right to opinion, have a right to assemble, and a right to engage in lawful, peaceful protest. And I believe that's a right of all Canadians. And at the same time, I think it's important. First of all, we have said very clearly, we respect that Israel has the right to exist and therefore a right to defend itself, and but we have also said that in that defense, that innocent civilians, must be protected under international law, that rules-based order that I spoke of earlier. And at the same time, we recognize that there are civilians in very dire circumstances. We've made significant contributions of humanitarian aid. We've worked very closely with authorities on the ground and with our allies in the region to try to get access to those civilians with that aid, get it to the people who need it the most. And we've also taken some steps because there were Canadians in the region, in Israel, in Gaza, and even in neighboring countries. We've taken steps to make sure that we fulfill our responsibility to our citizens to help get them to safety, and we've done that in collaboration with our partners in the region. And so we'll continue to do for that. And I think the Prime Minister has been very clear, calling for a pause in hostilities to allow international humanitarian aid to get to the people who desperately need it, and we'll continue to call for that.
And final question.
Hello, Eilish Hart, Medusa. Mr. Blair, I wanted to follow up on Alessia's question about the reports that a drone produced in Canada was purchased by a university in Russia. Aside from confirming or denying these particular reports, this type of technology ending up in Russia's hands, this is something that we've seen as a result of a pattern of sanctions evasion by Russia. So my question to you, aside from this particular case and whether or not it will be investigated by Canadian authorities, is what is Canada doing to prevent this type of sanctions evasion and close the policy loopholes that enable it?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, such an allegation needs to be investigated, and I'd much prefer to comment on facts than allegations, and so we'll wait the outcome of that. But I also want to state unequivocally that we believe those sanctions are important, and some of these technologies getting into the hands for those who are hostile to our country and hostile to our citizens is unacceptable to us. And our national security intelligence agencies have a responsibility. We work very closely with industry. We work very closely with the academic community to make sure that they understand their legal requirements to protect these technologies from their illegal export into those countries. And when it does take place, people need to be held accountable.
Right, but just to follow up, what in particular is being done to try to crack down on sanctions evasion, given that if technology such as this is ending up in Russia's hands, the current sanctions are clearly not adequate?
Well, again, if in fact that took place, then we have to look at how the sanctions may or may not have been evaded. I don't have that information right now, and frankly, I'm not going to engage in speculation or hypotheticals, but it's important that the national security intelligence agencies do their job, the police do their job, to investigate if our laws have been broken, and if in that investigation they determine that there is more that we can do in order to protect those sensitive technologies from ending up in the wrong hands, then we'll take those steps to make sure it happens.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Merci tout le monde. That concludes the press conference.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.